Have you ever wondered if Little Bo Peep hides a darker truth beneath its innocent lines? What if this simple nursery rhyme, loved by children for centuries, has a sinister backstory? Could it be tied to real historical events, punishment, crime, or even a forgotten figure from the past? Join me as we delve into the hidden history of Little Bo Peep and discover a story that may forever change how you see this childhood classic. Welcome back, darklings. Before we explore the sinister past of this rhyme, let's remind ourselves of the most familiar verses. Little Bo Peep has lost her sheep and doesn't know where to find them. Leave them alone and they'll come home, wagging their tails behind them. Most of us are familiar with these first few lines, but did you know the rhyme was originally much longer when it was first published in Gamma Gurton's Garland in 1810? Even the opening verse was slightly different. Little Bo Peep has lost her sheep and can't tell where to find them. Let them alone and they'll come home and bring their tails behind them. Little Bo Peep fell fast asleep and dreamt she heard them bleating. But when she awoke she found it a joke, for they still were all fleeting. Then up she took her little crook, determined for to find them. She found them indeed, but it made her heart bleed, for they'd left all their tails behind them. It happened one day, as Bo Peep did stray, unto a meadow hard by. There she spied, their tails side by side, all hung on a tree to dry. She heaved a sigh and wiped her eye, and over the hillocks went Stumpo, and tried what she could, as a shepherdess should, to tack each again to its rumpo. The imagery in this extended version is striking. The severed tails hanging on a tree create a particularly grim scene, but what does it all mean? The mention of tails hanging on a tree might evoke hazel trees, whose long, dangling catkins, commonly called lamb's tails, appear in late winter and early spring, resembling the fluffy tails of young sheep. However, the rhyme could also be interpreted in a more literal sense. In rural England, the practice of tail docking began around the late Middle Ages. Tail docking is the process of removing or shortening a sheep's tail, typically performed on lambs a few weeks old. The primary purpose is to reduce the risk of fly strike, a serious condition where flies lay eggs on soiled or damp wool around the tail area. Historically, docked tails didn't go to waste. Lamb's tail pie, a cherished Easter dish, was a hallmark of rural English communities, where no part of an animal was wasted. The tails were boiled or stewed with vegetables, herbs and rich gravy, then baked under a pastry crust, a hearty and resourceful meal. However, sheep tails held significance beyond their culinary use. These rural farming communities also gave rise to a wealth of rich folklore, with fascinating beliefs centred around sheep and their tails. For instance, if a sheep mysteriously went missing or died without explanation, it was often attributed to a witch's curse or supernatural interference. In rural Europe, docked sheep tails were frequently used as protective charms to safeguard the flock. Hanging a sheep's tail above a barn door or near a pen was thought to ward off evil forces and prevent illness. In some traditions, burning a sheep's tail was thought to repel evil spirits or witches. Folk rituals also involved burying sheep tails near a property or at crossroads, sometimes to bring good fortune, other times to cast misfortune on rivals. Could Little Bo Peep reflect these ancient rural beliefs? Or do the severed tails symbolise something entirely different? One popular theory suggests that Little Bo Peep is connected to smuggling. In the 18th century, the British government imposed heavy taxes on goods such as tea, alcohol, tobacco and luxury items, fueling a thriving black market. Tim Devlin, a historian and author from Hastings, explores this idea in his book on the origins of nursery rhymes. He proposes that Little Bo Peep symbolises the struggle between smugglers and customs officials in St Leonard's, Hastings, a region steeped in smuggling history. The Sussex coast, with its secluded coves, beaches and cliffs, was an ideal smuggling hotspot. Its proximity to France, just 21 miles across the English Channel at its narrowest point, made transporting contraband relatively easy. The Bo Peep Inn, built in 1548 in St Leonard's, became a notorious meeting place for smugglers in the 18th and 19th centuries. Although the original inn no longer stands, a modern pub with the same name pays homage to its smuggling past. Bo Peeps was a local nickname for customs men, while the sheep in the rhyme is said to represent smugglers who evaded capture. The tails symbolise contraband, often abandoned when customs officers got too close. Adding to the intrigue, the area also featured a Martello tower which was nicknamed Bo Peep and used by customs men as a lookout to monitor smuggling activity. But while these connections are steeped in local folklore, there is no definitive historical evidence directly linking the rhyme to smuggling. Could Little Bo Peep truly have its origins in secret shipments and coded messages? Or does the rhyme allude to a specific historical figure? In her book, The Real Parsonages of Mother Goose, Catherine Elwes Thomas proposed that Little Bo Peep might symbolise Mary, Queen of Scots. By the mid-16th century, England had officially broken from the Roman Catholic Church under Henry VIII. Scotland too was swept up in the Protestant Reformation, with leaders like John Knox steering the country away from papal authority. In 1560, the Scottish Parliament formally adopted Protestantism, further isolating Catholics. Mary, a devout Roman Catholic, found herself at the centre of intense political and religious conflict in both England and Scotland. According to this theory, Little Bo Peep represents Mary, who lost her sheep, a metaphor for the Catholic followers she could no longer protect. Her turbulent reign, prolonged imprisonment, and eventual execution reflect a tragic, futile struggle to regain her flock and her power. Could the rhyme be a veiled commentary on Mary's tragic fate, carefully crafted to evade political censorship? While speculative, the parallels between the rhyme and Mary's life are undeniably compelling, but there is no historical evidence to suggest that Little Bo Peep was ever a nickname for Mary. Furthermore, Mary lived in the 16th century, while the rhyme didn't appear in print until over 200 years later. However, many nursery rhymes have roots in oral tradition, passed down through generations before being written down, and most early nursery rhyme collections were reportedly gathered from oral tradition rather than being written by a specific author. Deepening the mystery, an older rhyme exists that appears to share a connection with Bo Peep. A verse similar to Little Bo Peep appears in an early version of Yankee Doodle, published in 1775. Our Jemima's lost her mare, and can't tell where to find her, but she'll come trotting by and bring her tail behind her. This is particularly interesting because the Little Bo Peep rhyme fits perfectly with the tune of Yankee Doodle. The melody we now associate with Little Bo Peep wasn't recorded until 1870. This raises some fascinating questions. Which came first? Did Little Bo Peep evolve from this earlier verse in Yankee Doodle, or was Bo Peep already widely known before its first publication in 1810, with the Yankee Doodle verse inspired by it? Could both rhymes share a common origin? We may never know for certain, but what we do know is that the phrase Bo Peep is much older than either rhyme, and it originally carried a far more sinister meaning. In the 19th century, when Little Bo Peep was first published, Bo Peep had come to mean peekaboo, the game played with babies and small children. However, the phrase has a much richer and more complex history. By the 1600s, it was often used to describe spying on someone or keeping watch while remaining hidden. This likely explains why customs men in St Leonard's were nicknamed Bo Peeps, and why the tower they used as a lookout for smugglers was also called Bo Peep. Even earlier, in the 14th century, the phrase Bo Peep referred to the punishment of standing in the stocks or pillory, a public form of humiliation. For example, in 1364, an alewife was convicted of giving short measure and sentenced to play Bo Peep through a pillory. Similarly, in 1542, Andrew Border wrote, "And evil bakers, who do not make good bread of wheat, but will mingle other corn with wheat, or do not prepare and season it properly, giving good weight, I wish they might play Bo Peep through a pillory." Meanwhile, sheep have long held a significant association with religion, particularly in the Bible. In the parable of the lost sheep, Jesus shares a story to illustrate God's care and compassion for sinners. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep and loses one of them. Does he not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the lost sheep until he finds it? And when he finds it, he joyfully puts it on his shoulders and goes home. Then he calls his friends and neighbours together and says, "Rejoice with me, I have found my lost sheep." Jesus uses this imagery to convey that, just as a shepherd celebrates finding a lost sheep, there is great joy in heaven over one sinner who repents and returns to God. The connection between Bo Peep as punishment in a pillory and the lost sheep as a metaphor for a sinner is intriguing, as both reflect themes of straying and repentance. In the parable, the lost sheep symbolises someone who wanders from righteousness but is brought back, signifying forgiveness. Similarly, playing Bo Peep in the stocks publicly shamed wrongdoers, not only deterring others, but also compelling the offender to feel shame and reflect on their actions, encouraging repentance. This parallel raises intriguing questions about whether the rhyme subtly reflects broader religious and societal values, using simple and memorable imagery to convey deeper moral lessons about sin, shame, and redemption. The line, "bringing their tails behind them," might also fit into this theme. The English idiom, "coming back with their tail between their legs," describes someone feeling defeated, embarrassed, or humiliated, often after a failure or reprimand. Evidence suggests that this expression has been in use since at least the Middle Ages. Although the idiom typically refers to a dog's submissive posture, it's intriguing to consider whether the Bo Peep rhyme draws on this imagery. It may represent a criminal or sinner feeling remorse for straying from the path of virtue and ultimately finding their way back to the fold. But what do you think? Are the origins of the Little Bo Peep rhyme rooted in rural folklore, the Smugglers of Hastings, the tragic story of Mary Queen of Scots, or the punishment of sinners? Or perhaps you have your own theory? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if your thirst for nursery rhyme origins still lingers, be sure to subscribe and explore the rest of my channel. See you in a future video.